The topic is building brands in the age of conscious consumers, balancing purpose, profit, and authenticity. So, ladies and gentlemen, to take this session, we have some wonderful panelists here with us. तो आप सभी की जोरदार तालियों के साथ put your hands together as I first of all welcome the moderator Simantika Sarmah, ladies and gentlemen, AVP Revenue, Channel Factory here on the stage. Next, I would like to do the honor to invite Mr. Santosh Kumar, COO, Innocean India. Mr. Siddhartha, who is the Chief Marketing Officer, Air India Express. Mr. Agarwal, Chief Marketing Officer, Grip Invest. And last but not the least, Mr. Rajat Abi, Vice President, Global Marketing, CMO, Schneider Electric India.
To start with, when we say consumers, what do you think about consumer? What comes to your mind? Well, here I am not talking about millennials only. I'm also talking about Gen Z and also your newbies, that is Alpha. So when we talk about consumers, we have to be very conscious while talking to all the brands. When brand picked up any campaign has to be relevant. We have very interesting panel, and I think they are the one who can give us more insights about this era and how products are talking about, relating to Gen Z, millennial, why not boomers, including boomers and Alpha. To start with, how are you doing, Mr. Santosh?
Very well. Going good.
Yes. So I won't take much of your time. I will just check, So when you decide for the campaign, because I know your background, you're from Innocean, so how do you talk about purpose and also connect it to profit and authenticity?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. So when we are talking about purpose, let me clarify that it should be very well understood. It is not a campaign-based initiative. It is a very consistent approach for any brand, and it is a part of a brand's core value. Mm-hmm. The moment brand is not it's not coming to the core values of a brand, it cannot be sustained, and that's where the authenticity loses the value. And this is what we also consider in most of our clients when we plan, is that the first of all, purpose are not picked up randomly. It has to be associated with the values. It has to be associated with the customers. It has to be associated with the product, services, after sales. Everything comes into becomes an integral part of the deciding those purpose. And it has to be relevant. The second thing is that when we are going about any purpose, then consistency and sustaining that purpose for a longer time is very important aspect. Because without this, it doesn't hold a value. It doesn't even get registered to the consumer's mind today. As the topic itself says, we are talking about a conscious customers, conscious consumers. Now today's everybody's aware of even a brand, that what kind of a product they are making, what kind of a services they are providing, where they have come from, what has been their core DNA or genesis. And social media and internet is throwing and especially now with the chat GPTs of the world, it's throwing a complete information about a brand. So the brand cannot hide those information. So the better always is that the brand should sustain that purpose, keep continuing talking about that purpose, but also living with it. It cannot be just only a marketable tool, or it just become a tool for gaining a customer's attention. But it is also an important aspect that the brand is sustaining that purpose and genuinely going after that purpose. It has to reflect upon. The third thing is very important, is to be very transparent about it. It's not necessary that brand can achieve 100% purpose, because it's a journey. It's not a destination. It's not a final achievement the brand can achieve towards it. So being very honest and transparent with the consumer, that what efforts they are doing in order to, towards that purpose, how authentically they are imbibing that culture into their own ecosystem, and regularly reporting to the consumers that where they stand today. These are very integral part of those purpose-led campaigns.
Yeah. To talk about sustainability, Mr. Siddhartha, it's very difficult for your industry, especially because your is new age industry. Why I said new age? Because after COVID, we can see there's a lot of change when it comes to aviation industry. So how you are coping with both sustainability and profit?
So let me start by saying that we're very conscious of the fact that about 2.5% of the world's CO2 emissions come from the aviation industry. So no matter what we do, we don't take a high horse on how we're doing it. In our case, we are, however, fortunate that because the CO2 emissions primarily come from fuel consumption, there is no distinction between the objectives of sustainability and profit, because both are derived upon reducing the amount of fuel that we consume. So since the highest input cost of aviation is also aviation fuel, the less fuel I burn, the more profitable I will be per passenger kilometer that I serve. So most of the initiatives that we drive towards profitability naturally address the reduction of carbon emissions from fuel burn. In addition to that, there are a number of other initiatives that one takes, which are outside of just the fuel burn consumption. Those include the likes of cabin waste recycling programs, taxi bot operations, which is effectively to not use even fuel which is on ground vehicles for taxiing the aircraft in and out of the bay. So there's a number of those initiatives, but those are all short-term tactical and marginal compared to the fuel which is being burnt. The long-term objective effectively is to reduce your reliance on traditional aviation turbine fuel and move towards what we call sustainable aviation fuel. Now, as it happens in India, there is currently no production of sustainable aviation fuel. As Air India Express, we were the first airline to have scheduled commercial flight operated with the regulatory approvals on indigenously produced SAF. But a lot of that is very, very difficult to do unless the entire supply chain and the ecosystem is in place for that. And part of that comes back to, because the costs are higher, how much more is this conscious consumer that we're speaking of willing to pay for a more sustainable flight, given that flying is a very price-sensitive and commoditized experience today.
My again question to you. So how you are addressing that? It's difficult, I understand, but because people are watching, consumers are watching, and they want to connect with both. And when we talk about Gen Z here, and they want companies to be also very reasonable and yet very connected to the companies. So yeah.
At the risk of making a controversial statement, they say they want that. The action, however, is not as evident. We have done initiatives like, for instance, charging something as small. So the average emissions on a flight is about 85 kgs, right? Over the lifetime of a tree, depending on what the species of a tree is, you can offset that emission. We have done initiatives like planting a tree in the name of the consumer and adding that element of price, which is about 100 rupees on a flight, which is marginal to a flight. And not just in India. I mean, we've done this in India. These studies, similar studies have been conducted by airlines across the world. The Indian consumer is not willing to, our take-up rate on that was less than 1% of consumers were willing to pay to offset their carbon emissions for the flight that they were flying. So yes, they say that they will, but the price sensitivity is so high that it actually doesn't turn out to be. We've reduced that price to lower than 10 rupees also to test that. Even in that case, the take-up rate remains less than 10%. And this is across the board of, I mean, there are some marginal differences on gender, on age groups, etc. But it's not like millennial consumers or Gen Z consumers are willing to pay more for that. Yeah. So you need three things effectively to make it happen. The airline, obviously, which then invests first in sustainable aviation fuel and therefore increases the cost of flying more sustainably, is at a natural competitive disadvantage unless either subsidized by the consumer or by the government, And that subsidy need not be in the form of cash. It could be a mandate that all airlines, and we welcome that kind of public policy, to say all airlines, and Nordic countries have done that, have to fly with a certain minimum amount of sustainable aviation fuel, or you have to set up carbon emissions offsetting, right? And the more customer advocacy that comes in will actually help us adopt that faster, because to be competitive globally, since those mandates are coming in globally, it is imperative that Indian airlines take the lead in that. So unless either the conscious consumer or the aviation industry themselves, the producers around that, or the government as a combination of that are willing to put in that extra investment, over the long term we stand to be at a disadvantage when we start flying to international countries, because those mandates when you fly in, for example, to Scandinavia, Norway, Sweden, etc., don't apply only to airlines based out of there. It applies to any airline which is flying in or out of that country.
So talking about sustainability, my question to Mr. Rajat. Schneider Electric is, I think it's a leader in sustainability. So how are you balancing ROI with sustainability?
Yes. First of all, thank you for having me here. I'm proud to work for a company which is rated year after year as the world's most sustainable company. Yeah. Now, which also means we have a lot of responsibility on our shoulders. Sustainability for us is not just a buzzword. It's not a fad. Yeah, it's serious. It's serious stuff. So there are 4 areas we focus as an organization. The first focus is ensuring that our products and solutions are world class, but they are created sustainably. Yeah, so when we start designing, so the entire process through which we do the design thinking of our products, we ensure that we are producing and we are creating products thinking that eventually there would be some kind of carbon emission which will go. That is the first part. The second part is the consumers and the customers who will be using the products. As an organization, what can I do to help my customers and consumers in their journey? So on one side where we are talking about supply side, which is use solar, use wind energy, use more renewables. India is projected to move to almost 500 gigawatts of renewable by 2030, which is the supply side story. On the demand side, which is people who are sitting in the room, consumers like us or customers, the bigger ecosystem, are they using latest tools, technologies? Are they using automation in their factories? Are they using artificial intelligence in their products? So we provide solutions to customers and consumers to accelerate their sustainability journey. The third piece where the organization is working very strongly is the entire ecosystem of vendors which we work, yeah, which is primarily coming in scope 2, yeah, which is scope 1, 2 and 3. So how do we make sure that the vendors who are supplying right from, let's say, raw materials are also sustainable? So we work with our vendors and our partners in making their operations sustainable. And last but not the least, our employees. Yeah, so we are one of the only few companies globally where the executive compensation of all leadership also has a certain element tied directly to an organization achieving its sustainability goals. So our executives don't get incentives or bonus end of the year only if you are doing, let's say, top line and profitability and cash flows. If you are not achieving that very critical sustainability goal, you might achieve all your other goals, but you might get a bonus or an incentive which will not excite you. Yeah. So as a group, over the last, we have been present in India for about 60 years now, with over 31 plants and 40,000 people work for us in India. Our trajectory has been to ensure that we are not only talking about sustainability, but we are walking the talk by bringing the entire ecosystem together, from employees to suppliers to customers and our own operations together, and ensuring that we eventually are playing a strong role in accelerating India's sustainability roadmap.
Well said. Mr. Ved, hi.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
I think you are the one I haven't met
That's right.
yet. To start with, in the context of evolving consumer expectations, how does GRIP Invest establish trust while pioneering a new investors category?
Cool. Thank you very much, firstly, for having me here. I think our brand is probably the youngest, so I'll just spend maybe 30 seconds telling you guys about what we do, and then I can answer that. So we are a 4-year-old young fintech, and we are basically trying to create a new category for high-yield investments, like secured investments, which typically give you about double of FD returns, right? So that's the premise. So we are talking to Gen Z, which is essentially the 35 to 50-year-olds, about a category which is super boring, right? It's finance. It's also very, very complicated, right? The moment you start talking ROI and YTM, people switch off. And here we are trying to, build trust with them. And, I come from 10 years of FMCG, and when we, started doing this, we realized that for the consumer today, there is no one big thing you can do to build trust, right? Because this consumer is connected through so many ways with you, and you need to kind of make that difference at every stage, right? So what did we do? So, again, with the premise that I said, we realized that the first thing we need to do really well is to drive simple communication and tell people what they're getting into, right? If you look at the world of finance, etc., or categories adjacent, the biggest pain point is मैं क्या खरीद रहा हूँ मुझे समझ में ही नहीं आ रहा है. I don't know बाद में मैं कहाँ फंस जाऊँगा. I have nobody to help me, right? So we said the first way to solve this is to simplify and dumb down everything so that common people like you and me kind of get it. The second thing was over-communicate concepts, right? We said that, everybody has their own subjective view on what A is, B is, but can we be kind of enablers to your journey to kind of tell you, right? So content plays a really, really important role in our entire trust building, whether we talk about top funnel, mid, bottom, we do all of those. And third thing we said we have to do is we have to stay consistent, right? For a brand, for young startups, it's not unheard for us to keep, changing trajectory, trying something new, but we realize that has significant downside, when you're talking to a slightly more matured cohort. And so, we picked our battles and we said, okay, consistency, simplicity, and over-communication in terms of, driving education through content would be our key pillars. And, 3 years into this journey, we have close to about 70% repeat rates for a category like investment. So probably something has kind of ticked, and that's how we build trust.
Well, so to all the panelists, I want to know your views about, how Gen Z and millennials are looking for brands nowadays. They are not only looking for good products, they are looking for that shift. So how are you addressing that shift? Starting with Mr. Rajat.
I think there is a time which comes for every generation, yeah? So if you look at, in every 10, 15 years, the generation changes. One trend which I see, consumers and customers are very evolved. People are spending more time researching brands. You cannot make, and I will be a little bit crude also, you cannot make somebody fool, yeah? So people are educated, education levels are high, information is at your fingertips. Yeah, even before you're trying to market something, people know what you are trying to do. End of the day, purpose is very critical, yeah? So at least that is what we believe as a company, as a group, that whether you are Gen Z or baby boomer or ABC, you want to associate with those companies and those brands which really walk the talk. Which means if you are promising something, yeah, so if you are promising that I'm going to deliver, let's say, item in 10 minutes. So you need to deliver that item in 10 minutes in exactly the quality which a consumer expects you to deliver. So if you deliver an item and the quality is not the quality which they expected, you are gone. So I would say consumers are evolved. They want to go for brands which are more responsible, who can be trusted, but end of the day, trust takes time and years to build. Trust cannot be built through marketing or through advertising campaigns only. It's a combination of the experience you are giving to a customer, every, I would say, step of the value chain and the journey is super critical. So brands and companies who are able to establish that trust, irrespective of whether you are, let's say, a 4-year-old startup or let's say a 200-year-old company. Yeah, if you are giving that experience at every step of that journey, according to me, you would be a trusted.
So, as you rightly pointed out, Rajat, that the customers today is very much evolved. But one thing that connects every customer is the emotions, and brand builds on those things. Because it's not about just communication that brand is doing with the customers or consumer, but it's also what they are bringing as a value in their life, in customer's life overall is there. And hence, in entire customer journey, every touch point, the most important aspect is that apart from marketing and advertising, brand has to be honest and transparent when they are communicating to the customers there. Because today, social media is there, sentiments are there, it takes minutes just to get any trolls to get activated and all. It's like, so it has to be very sensitive, responsible, and again, walking the talk, which Rajat has mentioned earlier as well, is the most important aspect. There the trust starts building in. Because proposition-wise, everybody's talking about, everybody's communicating the same thing. But people really believe when they experience it. And that's the reality of it. I'll give you one example of one of my client, which is into mobility. And mobility is, of course, everybody's, when you're talking about cars and all, everybody's going for experiences, driving experience, design, product, technology, sustainability, those aspects of things is there. But we chose a purpose that if it is a mobility, then why not it's a mobility for all. So the people who are differently abled, who have limitations in being mobile, have a lack of accessibility to reach the places where they want to go. Now, they are also part of our society. They should be included into our society. And that's where the entire route we have taken, this called as Sarmah, which is, it's about they are able, what all we need to change is our point of view, and we have to include them. They are just a part of our society and all. So, when it comes to walking the talk, before even going to talk to the market that what we are initiatives we are doing it, the first thing is that the entire showrooms, all the offices, all regional offices, even we do a small to large event, every place is a accessible place for those people. That's the first thing we ensure is there. There's a reserved places, parkings for those people who can, who are wheelchaired or who has thing. So these are the small nuances which brand has to first build in. That trust has to come in, and then only we can talk about purpose in the market is there. Then people take it and they believe it. And again, sustainability, taking it consistently and long term. You can't just leave it one place. I cite one more example, and which I love from a purpose-driven brands is there, is the Dove. Everybody talks about it and all. But the real thing is that when Dove took this stance, it's very difficult for a brand to choose that they are casting a real people, not even models. And even in any of advertising, they don't even do a airbrushing. Now, this is very difficult for a brand or production to do those kind of activities, but that stand itself makes a lot of difference. And you see the results is there. In a decade, the sale of Dove, it was 2.8 billion grew to $4 billion. So it is directly connected to ROI. It is not that the purpose-led brand does not have impact on the ROI in the business. It's very evident. Lifebuoy is another case of similar kind of ROI. So it is proven research, and that there are the data points that consumer loves purpose-led brand more than a general brand without a purpose is there. That has been enough data points available on that. So this is, I think, a brand should be always taking and considering about it.
I couldn't agree more, actually. I think inclusivity is one of the key things when you talked about the difference in generations. The increased feeling of alienation and therefore the need for inclusion, driven at the same time by a change in what has happened in the socio-economic period over the last couple of decades. The generations that grew up earlier and the generations that have grown up now, two major changes: where India is in the world, which defines how we want to define ourselves when we're going abroad. That feeling of lack of confidence as an Indian when you went abroad earlier is no longer there. There is a pride, an increased pride in being Indian. There is an increased pride within India and a resurgence of a regional identity, whether it is of language, of culture, of heritage. So one of the things that we did when we relaunched Air India Express a year and a half ago, while the brand purpose for Air India and Air India Express is the same, and it is to turn a national institution into a national inspiration, because we recognize that these brands have been institutions. But how do you make it inspiring? Because there are very few brands from India that at a global stage have got the recognition and the ability for other brands to look up to and say, yes, this is truly a global brand, right? So the proposition that we went with for Air India Express, which stems from the same consumer insight, was fly as you are. And the fly as you are came from the same space that actually it is a very small percentage of Indians who have taken a domestic flight even in the country. And there is a sense of apprehension for people when they take their first flight, because flying has always been seen as the bastion of the elite or the rich. It is no longer in practice the case, but people feel alienated when they walk into the environment, and the airport infrastructure in the airline does nothing to alleviate that. As soon as you walk in, the security, the way in which you're treated, the lines which you have to stand in, if you're holding an economy class ticket or a business class ticket, you're treated differently, the service you get is different. All of that increases that feeling of alienation. So the more you can do to bring in inclusivity, and there were small steps even in the fact that we were the first airline, for example, to get rid of the requirement of gender in the booking flow. Salutations can be gender neutral. Once we did that, Vistara followed suit, and now that is now becoming a global practice across the board. But there are small steps that you can do towards that. The other major difference that has happened is the generations that you mentioned now are digitally native generations. And so, speaking to what Rajat was talking about, impatience in or attention span, right, has increased significantly. So when we revamped the
I think it's 8 seconds now.
8 seconds. So I'll come to that. Exactly. Yeah, it's 8 seconds, and 7 seconds roughly, I mean, is what the goldfish had. We revamped our booking journey on the website to be able to go from flight search to payment and completing a booking in under 15 seconds. We launched a competition where people actually did that. Now, the average consumer does not spend 15 seconds. They spend about 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes at the minimum. But if you don't have a very responsive website which is able to do that, then the engagement levels from that consumer drops. When that engagement level drops, my ability to convince that same consumer who is used to scrolling on Instagram and Reels to scroll through my meals and select a meal or purchase a seat reduces significantly, because they get irritated when that loading screen comes in or when something doesn't move as fast. So catering to the psychological mindset of not even what the consumer is conscious of, but how they're used to consuming content, to redeliver your service in a way that is more inclusive and allows more personalization of that service to the consumer. People want to be able to put up a whole set of services in the entire journey, and it could be travel, it could be any other journey, that allows them to personalize their experience, because they want to feel that what they've purchased is for them and not as a one-size-fits-all at the end of it.
So I actually think, purpose is spoken about a lot, very little done about, both from a marketeer and a consumer perspective. I think it's good conversation. Because I also think it's not very clean today, right? Lots of people are using, and you mentioned about it, right? It's not a campaign idea, right? It's not one Daag Achhe Hain campaign that Surf Excel does, makes everybody teary-eyed, and it's done, right? They do that for 15, 20 years, keep doing it, and that's how it happens. Today, you need to do it across touch points, multiple times. The second nuance also is that there are certain brands which are just generally more consumer marketing friendly, right? When we think FMCG, airline, aviation. And then there are brands which are more B2B, which don't get the opportunity to do that. So I think, Simon Sinek also said, you need to know your why very clearly. And, if that's clear, whether you're B2B, B2C, maybe it will show in your P&L in some way or the other, but nothing in the short term. It needs to keep happening.
Yeah. My next question to you again, Ved. So I would like to know, being from investment space, how Grip Invest ensure authenticity and maintain transparency?
Yeah, so again, very complex, apparently very complex category. We have the whole bunch of regulators on one side, we have the government, and then we have rating agencies. Now, how do you kind of simplify this entire maze of people or industries and present it in a form that kind of makes sense to people, right? So, again, we said that the only way to solve for this is over communication, right? Consumers are happier to be bugged with more information for high engagement categories, right? But it needs to be sent out to them in a way which is more palatable. So just to give you a sense, we have a lot of investment deals that keep going out. Typically a deal on our website gets sold out in like 24 to 48 hours. It's like Amazon, right? So how do we communicate it? There's the old way, and then there is the new way of engaging with people through WhatsApp and, kind of gamifying the entire experience. So you've made the same old traditional offering, you've packaged it better, and you've made it palatable to people, right? So I think those are the kind of things we do. And yes, I think at our core, we believe that we have to over-communicate, we have to be super authentic. We are a young brand, we make mistakes all the time, but we are also the first to kind of go own up and say, hey, we messed up and this is what we are going to do to fix it. And 9 out of 10 times, we have only received appreciation, because then we also set ourselves for a high bar saying that, hey, we messed up this time, but we'll fix it. And we always do that, right? So I think that's the mix that young brands, we don't have the budgets to take on the large financial organizations and, do large purpose-driven campaigns.
Can you name a few?
You want me to name competition brands? No, so no, I don't want to put myself in a fix there, but yeah, think about the investment space, right? You have the whole cohort of equity part.
We can see a lot of Nikhil Kamath.
Yeah, right? So thankfully Zerodha doesn't advertise, so they're out of this league. But, there are very, very large fintech players today who can, kind of build consumer perception through communication. But then there are few that you need to build perception through experience, touch points across, all the times that the consumer engages. And that's what we are probably doing.